saw an old man in a veteran's hat at the service station pumping his gas. Pulled up beside him.
Hello and welcome to Tilling It Like It Is, UGA Extension in Southeast Georgia's newest source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture. We are coming to you live again from Midville. We just finished up an agent peanut maturity and cotton defoliation update. That's where we get some of our specialists to come over and give us a little bit of a refresher for us agents on going into the maturity, checking for peanut maturity, and then also going into making decisions on defoliation for cotton. And so I wanted to that's kind of on topic for today's kind of focus. And normally, I do want to mention, if y'all are new here, my name is Blake Carter. I'm the Effingham County Ag and Natural Resources agent. Normally I have my co-host Savannah Tanner, but she is unfortunately not able to be here with us today. So it's just going to be me trying to hold the reins. But I got some really cool guests here with us. One's a return guest, so I guess he didn't get enough of us the first time, so we got to bring him back. Mr. Wade Parker, Southeast area agronomy agent. And then we also have with us Cliff Collins, who is one of two Burke County Ag and Natural Resources agents. So he's relatively new to the district, but he's been with us in Extension for a couple of years now. So I'm glad to have both of them here with us to kind of help talk about some of the things that's going on around us. And normally I do what's going on, and we talk about more of what I've been seeing in the office, but I've asked Cliff to do something special for us. And Cliff, I'm going to ask you to kind of jump in here for the what's going on and kind of row by row report. We're kind of combining them today because Cliff is going to give us an update from a local standpoint from Burke County, from what he's seeing in terms of peanuts. What is he seeing with maturity, and then also what are some of the decisions that growers are having to make right now in Burke County. And I know that applies for a few of us across the Southeast, so not just Burke. But Cliff, thank you for joining us today.
Hey Blake, glad to be here. So we've started a few peanut maturity checks as we're getting the calls in, and we checked some this morning that are 17 days out. We checked some last week that were sitting at 30 days out. And so, there's quite a variation there depending on planting date and all the other factors that play into that. Some of our issues that we're seeing still right now are our white mold counts.
Mm-hmm.
They're not super high this year, but depending on the peanut fungicide program, so on and so forth, some growers are choosing at this point to step up their fungicides.
Mm-hmm.
And so, depending on where you're at in that, don't stop them. Keep the rotation intervals tight.
Yep.
All that good stuff. We also had I'm not going to say a huge amount of tomato spotted wilt virus, but a decent amount, enough to count. But that was primarily in our fields that did not use Thimet.
Mm-hmm.
And so where we saw Thimet, we were seeing 5% or less hits of tomato spotted wilt, but in other fields, 15, 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And that can cause a major yield reduction.
Yeah.
So just based on, where you planted, when you planted, your thrips pressure, depends on kind of where you are.
Now, when it comes to tomato spotted wilt, in the past, and I'm just going to speak from an Effingham standpoint. In the past, our numbers have been pretty, low compared to other places for us, and we've been real fortunate with that. But this year for Effingham, we've had a pretty, I'd say it's been worse in some of the dry land areas that use the imidacloprid or another means other than Thimet. It has had a little bit of an increase in terms of pressure this year. I think it's just been a perfect storm of things coming together to kind of increase that. But like you said, in some of the fields we've seen, Thimet being used, or even planting in the twin row style has those are the areas where we're going to see that lower those lower hits of that tomato spotted wilt.
Mm-hmm.
Now when it comes to tomato spotted wilt, It's real easy to kind of see it. I know a lot of growers probably know what we're talking about, but if you've never seen tomato spotted wilt, it's going to look like your plant has these kind of specks, like somebody took paint and kind of made these little dots and specks and like little um, uh, things on the actual leaves. It's going to be discolored. A lot of times the plants are going to be stunted. They're going to be smaller. They're going to be kind of shriveled up a little bit. It's real easy to tell where you have tomato spotted wilt in a field. So if you're if you're new to peanuts or haven't really paid much attention, when you start to see some of those small plants like that, odds are you've got probably some tomato spotted wilt going on, and that's going to when we're getting into maturity, I'm gonna let Wade talk about that in a minute, but we're getting that point where we're checking it. When you're opening up some of those peanuts that have tomato spotted wilt, make sure that you know which plants you're pulling peanuts from, because if you're pulling from a tomato spotted wilt plant, you're going to have discoloration on the actual nut. You're going to have some other things going on that isn't representative of the rest of the field, and it could also look like it's got bronzing when it's really not bronzing. It's got some spots like tomato spotted wilt. Now, when you were talking about the fungicide program, you mentioned about the white mold. Are you seeing it a lot above ground white mold, or are you seeing below ground, or a little bit of both?
So seeing more above than below. And one thing that really seems to be kicking it off is deer pressure. And so where the deer are pawing at the ground at the base of the plants, is causing a high susceptibility to white mold. And so basically, when you're walking across your peanut fields, if you just see a plant dying, single plant, look at the base of the ground. You'll likely see the white mold right at the crown, right at the ground.
Or you might see some lesions. I know sometimes you got to pull them out, and if you start to look at the underground white mold, is harder to tell because obviously it's underground, but you would still see the same signs that you would above ground, but just underneath. So if you pull up those plants, it's a good way. But yeah, just like Cliff said, I mean, if you see a plant dying, there is a good chance it's going to be a white mold issue rather than some of the other things, because you're going to see leaf spot, you're going to see tomato spot wilt, you're going to see those things a lot easier. But they also know that those plants aren't necessarily dying from those things. But when it comes to a complete death, usually a finger points to that white mold there. Now, what about leaf spot? Are you seeing any of that going on?
Not much of any.
Yeah, I haven't really seen any. I've been checking, like I said, we started checking maturity in our peanuts probably last week, and the plants look great in terms of the actual vine health.
I'll tell you something else, that even as dry as it is, it's been kind of surprising that the peanuts are holding on as well as they are. You're not losing peanuts when you pull plants. When you're pulling them off, you're seeing that little piece that holds it to the peg.
That webbing or that foot, the webbed foot,
the umbilical cord.
That's right. And if y'all haven't been around peanuts or y'all haven't checked peanuts or checked maturity or know what we're talking about, even farmers that grow peanuts sometimes don't know what we're talking about when we talk about that. But when you pull a peanut off and it's attached well, you're going to have this almost webbing like a foot that's holding that peanut to the actual plant. And when you pull them off, that's what you're going to want to see, because that means that plant's holding on to those nuts really well. If you start to lose that, if it's real easy for them to fall off when you're picking them off, then we're going to have to start talking about some other, there might be some issues there with peg strength, holding on to it. And that could lead us to choose a different way of handling the maturity too. Anything, I know I'm going to put you on the spot. Anything on the cotton world that you want to share? Nothing on the cotton world. I'll put you on the spot. No, I told you to be prepared for peanuts. I'll say, from the reason I say that, we just had that training outside, so I ain't gonna give Cliff too much trouble. It's like drinking from a fire hose around here sometimes. But when it comes to some of these, when we're talking about cotton defoliation, I'll let Wade kind of mention that. If you want to kind of jump in for our row by row reports, I appreciate Cliff for the what's going on around here. Wade, speak to that a little bit with the defoliation side.
All right. Well, Blake, let me start off by thanking you for inviting me again.
Yeah.
If you invited me for the second time, I either did a really, really good job or he just can't find anybody else, but I'll take it any way I can get it. How about that?
That's right.
But anyway, it's always good to be here and visit with you. With respect to cotton defoliation, just like you said, we just had our agent training under the shelter at the Midville research facility. And we learned a lot about defoliation. Like Blake said, it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. But I do think it was interesting to see the different plants and how the storm, tropical storm Debbie, actually impacted our crop.
Yep.
When we ask ourselves, how did this storm impact our crop? Well, the first thing that you think of as well is matted up, it's tangled up, it's lodged. Well, all that is true. That is true. It's especially the cotton that got on the rank side that may have missed an application of growth regulator, or for whatever reason variety it got rank. Those varieties are tangled up pretty bad, and we're just going to have to deal with those as far as defoliation. I can tell you, even at 70-cent cotton, it doesn't take long to pay the application fee for an airplane. We do have that service available over here in East Georgia. You just have to find which one that's willing to take it. But it doesn't take long. And I know our sprayers are big and they cover a lot of area. But if the cotton is matted up and is tangled, you need to make a good assessment once those bowls open up, because the plants will stand back up to a certain degree once the weight is taken off of them. So having said that, we do have, I would say, Blake, in probably 2 weeks, I think you're really going to start seeing the defoliation level pick up. Right now, a lot of our fields are at 25, 30, 35% open. Of course, it depends on when the cotton was planted and what kind of conditions the cotton has experienced. So all those variables have to be taken into consideration. But one more thing about the storm is, and Dr. Hand was telling us or showing us how the plant actually kicked off a lot of squares and a lot of small bowls, I'd say probably 10 days after the storm. So the storm not only got us with the structure of the plant, but we did lose some missing positions. And I thought that was very interesting. And if you pull up a plant, you can kind of actually tell when the storm hit.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying that every field's going to respond like that, but the ones that he showed us today was interesting.
It's like some bare limbs, like
it is bare limbs. It kind of looks like plant bugs had gotten into it. If I had to compare it to anything.
But it's only from that, if you really know about cotton plants, you can tell the days gone by because of how it grows. But you could tell that window because that's where you lost a lot of those. Like you'll have some good bowl set, and then there was like a missing gap, depending on the time of year that you planted, and then it started producing again, trying to put on some more bowls and some more squares.
Yeah. And defoliation is just like peanut maturity. I mean, if you do it too early, it's going to cost you money. But if you do it too late, it will definitely cost you money. And just keep in mind that the bottom bowls, those first position bowls, are worth so much more as far as monetary value versus those top bowls.
Yeah.
So don't sit there and wait day after day after day trying to get every one of those top bowls, because if you take a knife and you try to cut through a lot of those bowls at the top and you've reached that 60% level of bowl opening and those bowls are hard to cut into, you may be pleasantly surprised that a quart or maybe even 40 ounces of prep or Ethifon will open those bowls. So don't sit there and wait on every last bowl to open. I caution people against that.
Oh yeah, and know that I think Wade, you have a lot of experience working with this with the deer damage. Knowing what you got out there and knowing how much of your field has been affected will be a very big piece to you deciding how you want to pull that trigger for defoliation. Because I mean, a field that's been ransacked by deer is going to be a different management strategy.
Well, it's actually it's later planted cotton,
right?
Because the deer came in, they destroyed the terminal, or they've destroyed those first positions, and that plant actually had to rehabilitate itself. So it's actually a later planting date. But the way I do deer damage as far as defoliation, you've got to look at the total percentage of the field, and you got to anecdotally, when I say anecdotally, just in your mind, how much is damaged by deer and how much is normal production. And it's very risky waiting for the part that's damaged if it's a lower percentage. So you're going to have to make a good conscious decision on that.
Well, I appreciate that from the defoliation side. I think we can switch gears now, moving from the cotton side to going into the main bulk of this episode. And we talked on cotton, but we really want to focus on peanuts because I know that peanut maturity is happening right now in full swing. We're going at it, trying to figure out when the best time is to harvest and pull those triggers. So, Wade, first I want to kind of talk about what factors have really been some of the big impactful players for the total quality and yield for this year, for this crop. What are we seeing? Is it heat, drought, a little bit of everything? Is from
just to recap some of the big weather events, not necessarily an event, but a weather period that I'm familiar with and dealt with during the growing season. We had a pretty good planting season. Now that is contrary to our friends down in extreme South Georgia and Southwest Georgia that stayed very wet during May. We had 10 good days of planting weather where, again, they did not. So we got a lot of our crop is planted on time. Now, I'm not saying we still don't have some June peanuts, and I'm not saying that we don't have some early April peanuts, but I would say the bulk of our crop is planted between May 21st, May 10th, somewhere in that area. And Blake, before I get into that, I do want to mention these planting acres.
Yeah.
I was visiting with Dr. Mumford, our extension peanut agronomist, the other day, because I go around the district and I do some of these crop updates, and I had talked to him about when our crop was planted as far as different percentages. So in April, 14% of the crop was planted. This is the whole Georgia crop, not just our area. So in April, 14% of the crop was planted. May 1st through the 10th, 26% was planted. So you can see we knocked a hole in it that first week of May.
Yep.
All right, May the 11th through the 20th, only 12% of the crop was planted.
Wow.
Now, if you're familiar with Georgia peanut production, that week, 11th through the 20th, is prime time.
That's right.
That is when planters are rolling. So Blake, I'm gonna be the host this time, and I'm gonna put a question on you. Why do you think that only 12% of the crop got planted May 11th through the 20th?
Yeah, that's a good. My initial thought would be weather.
Okay.
What you think?
You can't go wrong when somebody asks you a question like that about farming. If you say weather, you're gonna be right.
That's right. that was a shot in the dark.
So anyway, it's just what I alluded to. Our planting came to a halt in extreme South Georgia and Southwest Georgia, but you can see conditions improved May 21st through the 31st. 34% was planted, and then June it just started decreasing down to 13%. So anyway, just to highlight it, a lot of our crop in Georgia is late due to the excess of moisture, but our crop was pretty much planted on time. Now, having said that, we had a very dry June. Pivots were running wide open, but if you're going to have a drought, that's probably the best time to have it is early in the stage of a crop. So June, we survived that. It started back raining on
That's right.
in July, good July. What happened in August?
Debbie.
Tropical storm Debbie.
That's right.
Delivered anywhere between 6 and 15 inches of rain for our area. So we got saturated.
Yep.
And then what are we in now? We are back to an extremely dry pattern.
Yep.
So if I had to sum up 2024, it's kind of like the Scream Machine or the Mind Bender at Six Flags. You go up,
right.
then you go down.
That's
So
right.
right now we're in a down. So where does that put our crop? Blake, the irrigated crop appears to be the trains are running on time.
Yep.
We're looking at 140 to 145 days as long as the farmer stayed up on their water and did what they were supposed to with that. Dry land is going to be interesting. If it is later planted, if it's a later planted crop, when I say that at the end of May, 1st of June, and I put these peanuts on the board, there is a ton of light brown and even yellow peanuts. So that tells me this crop has a long way to go.
That's right.
So we got to get that crop from point A to point B. So what is it going to take? It's going to take moisture. Some counties got some over the weekend. I know where I live in Jenkins County, the most anybody got was a 10th. So that's not going to help us any.
Yep.
So we need rain. Now, toward the end of this week, there's a decent chance, but if we don't get any rain, the dry land crop is not looking good. Even the earlier planted stuff, to me, is at more risk with this dry weather because this had a make or break time. At least the later planted stuff, with all that stuff being yellow and light brown, is still holding on. But some of the earlier planted stuff is like, you have got to give me some rain or I'm going to turn loose in the hull. And once I turn loose in the hull, I am no longer viable if I get a 2-inch rain on top of me.
That's right.
So that is they'll sprout, and then the grower has to make a decision. So just to recap, irrigated looks good. 140, 145, that's for 06Gs. And it's not going to hurt these 06Gs to stay in the ground a little longer. If you think they need to stay in a little longer, that's not the end of the world.
Even 12Ys, you can push those a little bit
Well, 12 Ys, I tell you, you can leave them in the ground so long the heating elements in the oven will burn
Yeah,
out.
that's exactly right. I heard stories of Christmas peanuts last year.
So it's like the 12 Ys, we just kind of like watching paint dry.
That's right.
And don't get discouraged with them. I mean, check them just like you do your other varieties. But if it looks like on the board they're not moving, they will eventually start moving. And crack these peanuts open. When you take them to your extension agent, just crack them. Look at the inside, look at the overall health of the vines, make good conscious decisions on pest management on some of the stuff that Cliff has alluded to.
And I'll just say, that's a really good point. And I'll say, when I was looking at the board with some of the peanuts on there, if you are a grower or doing like a scrape method or something without going to the board, I think for me, I was telling another agent just a little while ago, if there's cloud coverage, if there's not enough light and sunlight, that color of that peanut's going to look a lot darker. So you've got to make sure you're making a really good educated decision instead of just going out there and kind of doing that scrape method, which is an older way of doing it.
That's how I learned. It's a scrape method. And the notches in the tailgate, we would have one notch for yellow, one notch for brown, one notch for black. And we kind of just made our own board based on the tailgate of the truck.
That's right.
But us being human beings, we're too lazy to scrape the whole peanut, so we would only scrape partial, and that's what we did. So I really like the method that we have now.
And I think that goes along. You were talking about the heat and the some of them are looking a little brownish orangish, but then part of that peanut might still be yellow on one side.
Yes.
Because that factor, those environmental factors could have made that peanut not fully color all the way out.
When we go outside in the morning time, it feels good.
That's right.
And we say, man, I hope this weather stays like this. But that's fine for me and you. But for that peanut plant and that cotton plant, it's not so fine because the heat units that you accumulate drastically decrease.
Yep, that's a good point. Now, if we're towards the end of September now, we should have already been starting to look at some of the maturities. Is it enough to just look at one sample and then make the decision on everything, or what would you recommend growers do to really try to check most of their fields if possible?
If I analyze a sample and there's not a doubt in my mind that a grower needs to wait 2 weeks, I would not check that sample probably for 10 more days. And if the farmer did a good job sampling, went to different spots in the field, got all the peanuts off that are harvestable, I would probably wait at least 10 days before I check it again. But if it looks like this sample's getting close, or maybe a week, maybe 6 days, 7 days, I would definitely check it a week later.
And make sure, you said that, what would, looking at the whole plant will help you decide that, right? So when growers are bringing a sample, what's the ideal sample? How should they bring you for the board?
Okay, let's start off by going to the field.
Yep.
You need to make at least 3 different stops in a field and pull up a couple plants in different spots. All right, that gives you variation because most fields in our area or any area has varying soil types. So we need to get a representative sample. All right, the peanuts you pick off are the ones that you plan on harvesting. If you see that little small nub and it's already September 25th, it's pretty much going to be mathematically impossible that's going to make. So if you pull that off, it's going to mess up the analysis of the sample because I'm going to tell that farmer, look, you need to wait, especially if the peanut looks and I hadn't been inside it. I'm going to say you need to wait. So just pick off the peanuts that are going to be that you plan on harvesting. Now, as far as the quantity, Blake, back in the day, we'd fill up a 32-ounce cup or a styrofoam cup, like you go to these gas stations and get fountain drinks, and that was our rule of thumb as far as quantity.
Okay, but if they want to have them pulled off, that's great. But make sure you bring the vines with you.
Bring the vines with you, so I can go and look in the truck, and if I see large amounts of leaf spot, if I see spider mites, I can bring that up with the farmer. I say, look, I see spider mites. What's going on out there? Then that would definitely influence my recommendation if I saw spider mites.
Oh yeah.
Or terrible leaf spot.
Yeah, for sure. Now when we're talking about maturity, we're talking about putting them on the board. We mentioned about 12 Ys a minute ago, but there's a lot of other varieties being planted, and there's some newer ones too. But what what do we need to know with some of the most common ones? What's a rule of thumb for 16 HOs or
Okay.
whatever the case may be? So everybody's going to have a little bit of different maturity, right? So what should we be looking for with the different varieties?
Let's talk about 16 VHO.
VHO.
All right, let's talk about it first. If you're not familiar with VHOs, it's very high leg variety. All right, the quality is good. Spotted wilt resistance is outstanding. And overall disease package is pretty good. But what makes VHOs unique from a negative side is they have a history of shedding, especially under high moisture conditions. So as we get further into the season, the chances of rain is eventually going to go up, and we've got a long way to go before we're out of the tropical season.
That's right.
So if you're growing VHOs, you need to really think about what that board and that profile looks like, because if you have ideal digging conditions and that profile is showing that, look, I think we can get by digging these, I think you're going to be better off, because if it gets wet and then you dig these peanuts, you run a very high risk of losing up to 15% of your yield. But again, good variety, good disease package, excellent spotted wilt. HOs can also have a problem with peg strength. The pegs can be weaker. The middle part of the peg, they have a history, but again, good. It's a good variety, high yielder, quality's good. You've got to remember these characteristics as you enter harvest time. But as far as the maturity dates, you're probably still looking at 145, 150 days.
Now I know Scott had mentioned, he was saying he believed this year our overall grades will look a little bit better.
Right.
And that's because he was saying that the nuts are actually filling out, right? He mentioned something about frost, and I wanted to, could you talk to me about, like, if we're getting close, because we are pushing some of these, right? At this point, some of us have an idea that we're not harvesting until at least 3 more weeks. With the chance of maybe a frost or a light frost or a heavy frost, what impact does that have on my decision to dig?
Okay. All right. Frost is very, very important to consider. I mean, I check the weather. That's just part of my life. And I just check weather. And I'm a big believer in checking that 10-day forecast.
Yep.
Now, will that 10-day forecast change 30 times before that date comes? Absolutely. But if you look at that 10-day forecast, you can start seeing some inclination that a freeze or a frost event is going to occur just by looking at it. And as we get closer, we can fine tune it. But to answer your question, frost or a freeze can devastate a peanut crop. It can cause them to go seg 3, which is very devastating financially. But if you see where a frost is imminent and it's time to dig your peanuts, you need to wait 48 hours. You need 48 hours in between your digging time and the weather event. You need 48 hours worth of time. Why do we need that? Because that's how long it takes to get that moisture down of the kernel, so the weather event does not affect it as bad. So if once you're within the 48 hours, I would just wait. Peanuts are better off in the ground. Think of the ground as an oven. That soil temperature is way warmer than the air temperature.
That's right.
Now, will the peanuts look ugly after the event? Absolutely. You will, if you hadn't been in this business long and you see that field, you just want to go back in the truck and go do something else, go cut the grass.
It ain't gonna win a beauty pageant.
No, it's gonna look very, very bad. But once the weather event passes, you can proceed with digging. 48 hours is the magic number.
I thought that was really interesting how Scott explained it, with how you want it to kind of come off from that hole a little bit more to help with that. He also mentioned that if it's a hard freeze, he was talking about you might need more than 48 hours, right?
If it's going to be a hard freeze below 32, I mean, just a no-brainer.
Yep.
It's a no-brainer. And even the largest farmers, I wouldn't take a chance on having my crop injured. Now, a negative to that is if the event doesn't happen, then they'll stay in the ground a little bit longer. But that's not going to be the end of the world.
Well, I appreciate you kind of going through some of that stuff. Is there any other thoughts or final comments you want to make in terms of, as we're looking down the stretch for peanuts, or cotton? Is there any other advice or anything you want to make sure people are aware of?
I just think patience is very important.
That's right.
2 things. Patience is important. Number 1. Number 2, watch the weather.
Yep.
Watch the weather. You've worked hard all year to make this crop, whether it's irrigated or dry land. and don't just blow it at the end because you get hasty, because it's very, very easy to want to get that plow in the ground. I used to have a farmer that would tell me, look, I got to get these peanuts dug because deer season's starting.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be without fail that I know is at least 500 pounds loss because of other interest in life. And that's ultimately their decision. But I do it. That still doesn't mean that I can agree with it.
That's
And
right.
so I just really like for people to be patient and get it right the first time, because there are no second chances.
That's right. Just like Camp said to us, in our meeting, he said something. You might have to go pick some cotton and come back to the peanuts, and cotton might win this year being picked first. I got a few of my guys that they'd rather take their time with the cotton and get peanuts out of the way beforehand and then just focus. But, like I told them a week or so ago, you can't rush it. We're not in control of some of this stuff, and especially with dry land. I mean, you're going to have to just play it by ear and see how it goes and keep your eyes on it. Irrigate's a little bit like Wade said, it's a little bit more standardized right now this year. But I will say on a positive note, it looks like on our side of the state, from the samples we've all seen, and we talked as agents, other agents across the district, it looks like our maturity is pretty uniform. It's not split crops.
I have not seen these split crops.
I haven't either, and I think that's I think that's a benefit, because last year I remember there was a good bit of split crops, and having to make that decision was
And I don't think we're out of the woods yet on the split crop.
Yep.
Because let's just say we get, remember when I was describing all the light brown ones and the white
right.
ones? So if our weather improves this week, that's going to push those forward.
That's right.
But you're still going to have a dip.
Yep.
You're going to have all this crop that I'm talking about, and then you're going to have that front crop. But what's going to be different is if you see this double crop and it's getting really toward the end of the season, it's probably going to make your decision process a lot easier.
Yep.
Now, if we see in split crops today, that's where it gets tough.
That's right. That's a good point. And for y'all that might not know about peanut maturity, and we talk about split crops, it's essentially exactly how it sounds. You have half your crop ready. It went through a set of weather pattern here, X number of weather events, and there was something that stopped, and then there was another set of nuts that came on the back end, and then you have this. In a perfect world, you have a nice bell curve. Well, then you have two, right? You have two humps, and it sinks down where there was not a whole lot in the middle. And so making sure that we decide, that's what kind of that split crop comes from, is having two different maturity stages. But I will say, making that decision, understanding what to ride the screen, I think is a good way to kind of, if y'all have ever met Joe Boddiford and Jay Williams, that's the thing is, sometimes it's real easy to get discouraged not seeing all the dark colors, in some of these samples, but some of the lighter colors will still ride the screen. Thank y'all for up to this point. We were in the studio recording, and we're going to add a little piece to the recorded podcast that we had, and this is an update. Tomorrow the storm Helene's coming, and Savannah and I decided we wanted to get one more piece of information in this podcast that's geared to answering some of the questions on our growers' minds right now. And so we got Wade to come back in and add an additional piece to this podcast. So this next part, it might sound a little odd that we're bringing it in, but it's almost like a live on the scene interview or update from Wade. But Wade has graciously come back to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Wade and let him give us a little bit of an update on for our growers to know what this storm could potentially do, and what are some of the decisions that must be made and how they can go about doing those things. So Wade, go ahead.
Okay, let's talk about presumed tropical storm Helene, or soon to be Hurricane Helene, and I don't know if I pronounced the name right, but that's what I've been hearing on the news anyway. Okay, we got two crops. Well, we got more than two crops, but for the purposes of our row crops, we got cotton and we have peanuts. And let's talk about defoliation. I do not recommend any cotton to be defoliated ahead of this hurricane. The leaves act as a good protectant to the crop. It's kind of like growing a cover crop on your field. When you grow a cover crop on your field and you get hard rains, the cover crop actually breaks the fall of the raindrop, and that raindrop does not hit the ground as hard. And the same thing for cotton. As long as we have the leaves on the plant, you're going to have an added layer of protection. So as soon as the hurricane or tropical storm passes, fields dry out, we can go back to making defoliation based on our general defoliation recommendations. So until the storm passes, let's hold off on defoliation. Okay. All right. Peanuts. Peanuts are a little bit more trickier because peanuts, there's not a cookie cutter approach, and there's really not any kind of standard recommendation. The basis of my decision or my recommendations on whether to dig peanuts or not is based on the quality and the timing of maturity. In other words, when we check samples and we put them on the board, the first thing we look at is when is this crop need to be dug. Now, having said that, the second thing that we look at is the quality of the kernels and the quality of the vines. If the quality of the kernel is deteriorating, in other words, if they've turned loose in the hull and you crack them open and they've started shrinking and there's no life going to those peanuts. So what happens is if we leave those in the ground after a rain like we're going to get, there is a good chance you're going to see a lot of sprouting. So the farmer has to decide if the majority or a lot of the leading edge of the crop is ready to be harvested, and if the answer is yes, in other words, you have a lot of them that are in the black area or the dark brown area, and the back end of the sample, if it's got very few yellow ones, and then to add to that, if they're turning loose in the hull, I would consider digging these peanuts. Now, if the leading edge still has 10 days or it still has 7 days, there's still room for these things to add weight, and A, the kernels are still healthy, and B, the vines are not showing white mold, leaf spot, the stem strength is good, I would leave them in the ground and I would wait for the storm to pass. Yes, it's going to take X amount of days for the field to dry out, but again, you should have enough room on the board to where you're okay. So again, just to summarize the peanuts, look and see how mature the crop is, and then B, look at the quality of the vines and the quality of the kernels. Okay. Also, spider mites. We've had a few reports of spider mites, and everybody knows that we've had very, very warm days the last week or 7 or 8 days, and along with the warm days, we've had extremely dry conditions. I mean, very, very dry. And spider mites thrive in that environment that I just described. So if you have especially a dry land field that is suffering from spider mites, and it's within 2 weeks of digging, I would very much encourage you to go ahead and get these out of the field, and you don't worry about treating them. And if the spider mite infestation is over 3 weeks, or excuse me, if your peanut maturity is going to be 3 weeks before you dig and you have a spider mite infestation, you might want to consider treating these spider mites and getting rid of them. But how will the hurricane affect the spider mites? Will it kill the spider mites? No, it will not kill them, but it'll definitely slow them down. It'll slow them down from reproducing, and it'll slow down the feeding that they do, and the overall life cycle will be slowed down. But will it kill them? No, they just don't thrive in an environment that is very, very wet, and I think that's what we're headed for. Thank you.
Wade, Cliff, I appreciate you. You got one more thing?
Yeah,
Go
just
for it.
Blake, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I just want to kind of say a couple things about farm safety
Yes,
that
go
I
for it.
mentioned out there. I just want to encourage people to really be safe as this harvest season really gets cranked up. It's just so easy to have accidents, and we get very tired. We push ourselves to the extreme levels that we probably don't need to push ourselves to. So just be real cognizant of that. Also, we don't pull as many trailers on the road as we used to as peanut harvesting buying points have evolved over time, but we still do have a fair amount of trailers. So just a note to the public and farmers, just to be careful with these trailers. Anything that moves is going to have repairs. And when repairs happen, the outcome can be very shaky. So a lot of defensive moves can be done with the public. When you see a peanut trailer ahead of you that's moving slow, just give it time. Eventually you can get around it.
That's right. Don't rush anything. I'm telling you, it's if you just have patience, I promise you, it's a lot safer for yourself and for the people in those tractors.
It is.
And vice versa. We talked about it on another episode about just safety, general rules of thumb, but be smart. Use your common sense, because I know we all got it. Sometimes we'd rather not use it, but there's times where we need to, and this is one of them, especially with safety. I mean, it's important, and especially now we're in harvest season, and where harvest season overlaps with the busy travel season of the holidays.
Right.
It's not a good combination necessarily if we're not being smart. So like Wade said, that's a good point. I'm glad we ended on something like that. That's something to kind of keep in the back of our minds as we're going forward. I'm going to do my best to serve as Savannah's closing remarks section. She usually goes through some of the upcoming events, and as we're looking, we're looking at the some of the pasture rangeland forage insurance workshop that's coming up. That's on October the 1st. That's going to be in Bullitt County. We have a forestry update also in Bullitt County. Both of those are going to be the 1st and the 2nd of October. So if you're interested in one, you can stay around and go to the next one the next day. Y'all can be at Bullitt County 2 days in a row. If you want information on either one of those, you can contact the Bullitt County Extension Office, and they'll be happy to get you registered and point you in the right direction for that. Some of the other things, we just did our young farmer equipment auction. We had pretty good success with it. We've had an equine short course recent weeks, and we just had the citrus update. So if you missed any of those workshops that we have mentioned in the past, and y'all want some more information on those things, by all means, get in touch with us. We'd be happy to get you the resources that you might have missed, or give you an update on when the next course or activity will be around. So just keep those in mind. Like I said, and I also want to point out, we do have a blog now that we got it fully functioning and up and running. Savannah did a great job kind of redesigning something that was already in use, and now we've repurposed it. So we've got a really good podcast blog now. So anytime we have said, there's PDFs or there's resources out there that we've alluded to or mentioned, we're going to do a good job of putting those together with the actual episodes on our blog. So if you want to know more information or read some of the stuff that we talk about, by all means, check that out. We'll have that posted on our Facebook as well. All right. So I know next time we're going to have a really cool episode featuring what will be our first ever specialist on our show, Miss Carol Knight, and we're going to be talking a lot about livestock showing, things like that, as we're getting ready for the fair and turning towards the national fair. We got the fair in Statesboro, the fair in Effingham, and we also have the Sunbelt Ag Expo all on the horizon. So stay tuned for that. That'll be in a couple weeks, but until then, just keep telling it like it is. Thank you so much.
I lost my Lydia a couple years back. Took that pension and I bought her those pearls when there was still some good in this world.